Good afternoon, students. Welcome to History class. Today, we are going to start a new chapter. This is chapter 10, The Far East in the Middle Ages. Now, where is Far East, or which region is known as Far East? This phrase Far East is first recorded in 1661 and it came into common usage in the early 19th century because of the British colonial expansion to Eastern Asia. The term was used to describe all British colonies east of India. Today, it still refers to China, Japan, and other neighboring countries on the eastern rim of Asia. But its use has declined steadily in the later 20th century. So, the list of countries which comes under this Far East is given over here. In this chapter, we will look into the civilizations that grew in China and Japan. Now, China is one of the world's 4 ancient civilizations, and in the written history of China dates back to Tang Dynasty over 3000 years ago. So, if we look into the brief timeline of Chinese history, here you will find 4 major phases. First, starting with the ancient China, then imperial era, then the Republic of China era, and then the modern China of the present day. Now, prehistoric China's chronology is divided into Paleolithic Age, Neolithic Age, and the Bronze Age. Without any reliable historical records, most of what has been pieced together about prehistoric life in China comes from speculations about human activity at archaeological sites and unearthed relics. And the rest comes from what might be truth within Chinese mythology. So, here you can see the famous dynasties that rule in China. The first dynasty to rule in ancient China was Xia dynasty. After that comes the phase ancient China, and Chinese civilization began along the Yellow River in the Shang era. This is during the rule of Shang dynasty, and after that came Zhou dynasty. Next comes imperial China. So from the first centralized feudal empire, the Qin dynasty was established in 221 BC until the collapse of Qing dynasty in 1912. The Qin and Han dynasties were the initial periods of Chinese empire. During this period, a number of institutions were established that laid the foundation of the basic political system for the next 2000 years. And this Qin dynasty was the first and the shortest imperial dynasty in China. It was famous for building great projects such as the Great Wall and the Terracotta Army, which guarded the first emperor's burial object and was to protect him after his life. However, the Han dynasty was the longest imperial dynasty and was known for starting the Silk Road trade and connecting China with Central Asia and Europe. After Han dynasty, came China's Dark Age, that is from 220 to 581 AD. So when the Han Dynasty fell into decline, this China fractured into the Three Kingdoms period. And after this Three Kingdoms period, which continued from 220 to 265, the Jin Dynasty came, which then conquered most of the China. And it is after that the Middle Ages in China starts. It is after this dark age of China, which is from 220 to 581 AD. So we can say that China's Middle Ages saw steady growth through a series of regime changes. China went from having 4 warring kingdoms to being the most culturally sophisticated and technologically developed nations. Finally, it was consumed by the rise and fall of phenomenon Mongol Empire, which stretched to Europe. So after the end of Han Dynasty in 220 AD, China fell into this confusion state and nomads started attacking from north, and the country split into 3 kingdoms. So after the dark ages of China, it was first reunited again by a brief rule of the Sui dynasty, that is from 581 to 618 AD. So after the dark age of China, the first dynasty to rule China was the Sui dynasty, but their period of ruling was very short. It was short, but it was intense, with great conquest and achievement, such as the Great Canal and the rebuilding of Great Wall. Now, most of this dynasty's government institutions were adopted by later dynasties. It is considered, along with the following Tang Dynasty, to be a great Chinese era. So it is after the Sui dynasty comes this Tang Dynasty. So after the short-lived Sui dynasty, the powerful and prosperous Tang Dynasty unified China once again. The Tang Dynasty continued with the Sui's imperial examination system and optimized it. It ruled for 3 centuries, and it was also the golden age for poetry, painting, tricolored glazed pottery, and woodblock printing. So there were many things that happened during the rule of Tang Dynasty, and in our lesson we will read about this Tang Dynasty, their achievements, their contribution in different. Now, how this Tang Dynasty came into existence. Here we need to remember that it had its roots in Sui dynasty, that is the one which came before it. The Emperor Yang, who was the second emperor of Sui dynasty, was a megalomaniac. Now, what is megalomaniac? The one who seeks more power, who wants to be powerful, more powerful. Now, what he did, he started rebellions to break out from 613 onwards, to break out from his dynasty and start a new one. So this brought a new dynasty to power, that is the Tang. This would be one of the great dynasties in Chinese history. And the Tang built on foundation laid by Sui that we discussed earlier, to preside over what Chinese scholars have traditionally seen as one of the most glorious eras in their history. And in this chapter, we are going to read through this glorious era of history, of Chinese history. So that was all for today. It was a brief introduction to this Tang Dynasty and a brief idea about the Chinese civilizations. So we will continue with this chapter in the next class. If you have any query, you can mail your query in this given mail ID. Thank you.